Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thanks for coming. I'm Amy Sadao. I'm the director here at the Institute of Contemporary Art, and welcome to our season opening. Here at ICA, we like to say that the museum's a public space where anyone can come to encounter the unknown. And we can, as audience members, do this individually, meditatively, or in conversation with people and then ideas that we didn't expect to encounter. At its very best, the museum is a place to challenge ourselves, to develop alternative ways of seeing, and to build empathy along with knowledge. Artists are the ones who lead us there. They conjure and question and conceptualize. And the three exhibitions that are filling the museum and actually spilling out of the museum through August all offer ways for us to reconsider our perspectives as viewers, as audience members. The annual open video call is now a public installation on the south side of the museum. And it's available from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., even for passerbys or viewers who didn't expect that they would be intersecting with art. Upstairs, Ginny Casey and Jesse Reeves, the exhibition helps us reconsider the separation of fine art and decoration, distinctions between gallery and domestic space, and reorients our standard viewer experience by inviting us to lounge on sculptures. And finally, in our main galleries on the first floor, the Myths of the Marble plays against idealizations of the virtual and digital space. Alongside our constant companions, the internet and the screen, we'll re-encounter our bodies as lived, felt, racialized, gendered, touched, and touching realities. Supports for Myths of the Marble has been provided by the Inchworm Fund, the Royal Norwegian Consulate General, and I want to offer a special thanks to Johanna Norby Werno, Dorothy and Martin Bandier, Chuck Block, Stephanie and David Simon, Brent and Daniel Suntime, and Carolyn and Daniel Werther, with additional travel support provided by the Office for Contemporary Art in Norway. And we thank all of the lenders and the artist galleries for their support, and especially thank and welcome our guest, Tony Hansen, the director of the Henny Olmsted Kunstcenter, who initiated this partnership, and Malena Holtzberg Hulks, senior curator and co-curator of Myths of the Marble. Support for Ginny Casey and Jesse Reeves, as well as the ICA's Whitney Lauder Curatorial Fellow Program, has been provided by Leonard and Judy Lauder. And I, again, want to thank and welcome the lenders to that exhibition, some of whom are present tonight, including Bill Powers and Cynthia Rowley. Finally, the artists, the curators, all of the museum staff, and I want to acknowledge a couple of people who've made this season possible, in particular, Paul Swenbeck, our chief installer, and the extraordinary installation crew of local artists here in Philadelphia, to Mandy Bartram and Robert Cheney, as well as our brilliant design team at Other Means. With so many new works, commissions, and really just a new reorientation of the museum, this season is almost as new to all of us who work at ICA as it is to all of you who are joining us tonight. So welcome, and I really look forward to encountering this new season in your company. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alex Klein. I'm the Dorothy and Stephen R. Weber curator here at ICA. And this is my colleague and co-curator, Malena Högsberg, senior curator at the Henny Olmsted Kunstcenter, just outside of Oslo in Norway. Let's see if this is working. Okay, great. So just briefly, this is a group show with 11 international artists. They come from all over the world. And working in various mediums to address the notion of the virtual as a site of world making that is both a place of possibility but also cognizant of its limitations. And many of the artists are here tonight, and so we might ask them to just stand up and wave, and so that you know who they are, so that later tonight you can find them in the galleries. We're not going to go into too much depth, but we want to just give you some orientation points for the exhibition, so feel free to come up to any of us later and ask us questions, because we're more than happy to talk about the show. So as Amy mentioned, there are 7 new ambitious commissions for the exhibition, and much of the language of the exhibition was really developed in tandem with the artists. So we want to acknowledge our thanks to the brilliant minds that we've had the opportunity to work with. The seeds of this exhibition really started through conversations directly with the artists in a symposium that we held here at ICA last year called Virtual Enterprises, where we invited many of the artists who are in the exhibition to come together to think critically about how the virtual might be reclaimed and repositioned with regard to the body and kind of a reorientation of the senses, which is for us really the grounding of the kind of the political stakes of the exhibition. So I also want to reiterate our thanks, our profound thanks to our colleagues, to the crew led by Paul Swinbeck, Robert Cheney, Mandy Bartram, and many others on staff who made all of this possible. Putting an exhibition together is very much like making a movie. It requires a lot of different people who fill a lot of different roles, too many of whom are to mention at this moment. So really briefly, this exhibition was initiated by the Henny Onstad Kunstcenter and very quickly became a full-on collaboration, and so another thanks to Tone Hansen, the director at Hawk. This is a view of the Henny Onstad Kunstcenter glowing at night with the Shahryar Nishat, which will make more sense when we get into the exhibition. And with that, I'm going to let my colleague Milena start by telling you a little bit more about the premise of the exhibition.
Yes, I can just add that we're working on a catalog together between our institutions that you can look forward to this summer. It will have installation shots of the the 2 versions of the exhibition, and a few works were exchanged in each, so very exciting to have this possibility to sort of revisit your ideas and develop them further over the course of basically 2 years. But a bit about the title, Myths of the Marble. Marble here has a double meaning. It refers both to the 1972 photograph of the Earth taken by NASA, and shows, of course, it was called the blue marble, or referenced as a blue marble, as you'll know here, and of course showed the Earth both as a kind of constructed image, but also as something quite fragile in a way, and allowed us to sort of survey our world for the first time from afar, from space. It also refers to the classic material marble, a kind of durable material that yet has been used for centuries to simulate skin. And then overall, it for us speaks to the museum as itself a site of world building and a producer of meaning.
So when you hear the virtual, probably the first thing you think of is something like this, Oculus Rift, or the kind of escapist technology promoted by Silicon Valley. But just to say that while this is part and parcel of it, we really wanted to make sure that we're also grounded by the real. So questions of race, class, gender, socio-economic, political conditions that for us very much inform how we are allowed to both imagine and conscribe ourselves. And so this kind of site of world making is very much rooted in the place of the museum, but opened up beyond through technology. So just to kind of have this in the back of your mind, you don't need to have the critical language that we're employing to enjoy the exhibition. It's very much a kind of a visceral, physical experience. At some point, we had a kind of a running joke, or maybe not so much a joke, but an alternative title. We had kind of thought that maybe it should be called Hard, Soft, and Wet. And while that has this kind of pornographic kind of undertone to it, it's also very much about the materiality that you're going to encounter in the show, and this kind of tension between surfaces and liquids, hardware, software, wetware, and have that maybe in the back of your mind as you're running through the exhibition as another kind of connective tissue. There's a lot of questions of things that you can touch with your eyes but can't quite touch with your hands, and vice versa, and bodies and machines coming into contact with each other.
And I guess we'll just, to give you a little sense of how to navigate the exhibition to make sure you don't miss any works, they're both downstairs and a little bit upstairs. We'll just take you through the exhibition very briefly. Of course, there's so much to say about each work, so this will literally just be the one-liners about each work, but do spend some time in the exhibition. Every work is pretty complex. A touchstone for us in this exhibition is an older work from 2010 by Chris Marker. Of course, you all know him as an analog filmmaker, but also someone who was pretty invested in jumping at new technology and exploring what it could do. And he got very interested in Second Life, an early social media platform where people could lead these parallel lives in a virtual world. And in there, he has Guillaume the cat, his avatar, his artistic avatar, walk around the museum that is constructed both of his own work, but also these augmented masterpieces. It's both humorous and quite serious. And he has this amazing quote that we thought was pretty pertinent for the show. Building a virtual museum is more tricky than a real one. Marble, wood, and linoleum are lighter stuff than the mind alone. And of course, this reminds us of sort of ideas about what the imagination can push, but there's also a kind of ominous note in the end where Guillaume the cat is watching the world end and asks us in a way to reflect on our own role in constructing this reality through the museum.
And another thing about including a work like Second Life, and you'll see in a minute also us talking about a 16mm film, was very much about kind of foregrounding the materiality of technology itself. We often, hold our phones as if they're just invisible things. We don't see the technology in the moment that it is, but if you think back to like your Apple II computer or, your old calculator or your, the ancient cell phones, you'd see their material presence. And there's something about technology in the moment that it's in that it becomes immaterial. So part of this exhibition is very much about foregrounding the material presence of our technological interfaces. So something like Second Life, which actually isn't even that old, already feels very clunky and outdated. And I will just say also another thing on Chris Marker is that he passed away in 2012, so there's also this idea that his body is now endlessly roaming in the Second Life universe. And you'll notice that we're here reading our notes, and it's partly because we're just trying to keep ourselves on time, because we could talk to you for an hour about any number of these works. So we're very enthusiastic about all this material, so please do come and find us. So with some help with navigation in the show, because there's a lot of rooms to explore, and we hope that you'll take time with them, we're going to briefly just kind of touch on everything so that you don't miss anything. When you first come in, and right on the right, you're going to, there's a curtain that you can enter, and it's a work by the Los Angeles-based artist Caetano Ferrer, and he's very interested in histories of simulation and a kind of a physicalization of a kind of an augmented reality. And it's a piece called Endless Columns, Chicago School, and there's two architectural fragments that are of two opposing styles, and the details I'm not going to go into, but just to say there's a series of simulations, and then you go into this room, and there's an animation that plays on the column, and it's going to feel like it goes on forever and ever. And he's very interested in the space of the casino, where one loses track of all sense of time and senses, they don't have clocks in casinos. The stakes are very high. You can lose all your money. They pump in oxygen. So he's interested in these kind of alternate constructions of temporality. It's a 48-minute loop, and it's imagined as a kind of cyclical clock. And there's a kind of a soundtrack that goes with it. And then as you head into the room, you're going to be confronted by a giant marble, indeed. And also there's an interesting tension between what's analog, what's digital. We wanted to trouble those lines, these kind of binaries. So this marble that actually is a piece of marble but looks almost like some sort of a digitally fabricated thing, and you're going to see a screen that welcomes you. The marble actually welcomes you to the ICA. It's kind of greeter to the show. So there's also this thematic of the museum running throughout a lot of the works. And in this work, the camera is constantly trying to penetrate different orifices, and there's a moment where the screen kind of breaks down, and you'll see kind of little dots on the surface, and the artist Shahyar Nishat considers them digital pimples. So he likes this idea that technology is breaking down, has a bodiliness to it, and the soundtrack proclaims, "Where is the liquid?" as if it's trying to kind of break through to the liquid crystal display.
And right next to it is a work by Anne Graf, and maybe you can just wave so people know who you are, Anna. And it's in a similar way about material touch, but touch, I see we're already close to our ending point, but it's about material touch, but in the materials themselves. Anna has composed a armature of all various materials, and I encourage you to go talk to her about them. But they're basically all that represent these natural materials that are in all of our technological infrastructure. So not only do we touch these on a daily basis, the materials themselves go into a complicated geological interaction where they hold different temporal moments. And I think I'll leave it at that, but...
And then we're also very happy to have the artist Sandra Perry here. Who's going to wave? And just very quickly, she's very interested in the question of likeness that really actually starts with her own relationship with her twin brother, so a kind of the biological question. But then her brother's likeness was used without his permission in an NCAA basketball game. And so she's made a brilliant new installation and video where she tracks her brother engaging with the video game and also reclaiming his likeness, but then is also woven in with a narrative about objects that have been looted from their original environments that are now housed in encyclopedic museums and then remobilized with a kind of through digital imagery. And so there's this troubling of are they free? Are they still totally coded and captured? So please spend some time with that.
Right next to it is Daria Martin, the oldest work in the show, and it basically, very briefly, shows two naked human beings interacting with embodied AI, so artificial intelligence, in a kind of delicate dance between antennas and human skin. And it's a little bit unclear who's learning from whom in terms of as these two entities are interacting.
And they're robots that learn through touch, so this kind of thread of touch. And then on to the only actual virtual reality piece in the show is by the painter Florian Meisenberg, who maybe can just raise his hand. He just walked in. And we hope that you'll engage with it, but just kind of thinking about the painting surface as a kind of screen. And he's created this amazing virtual reality software that's pulling objects live from the internet. So there's a kind of real-time collaboration between you, the user, and these objects that are out in the world. And there's a gravitational pull in the system that you're able to engage with these objects and upends the logic of the museum. Rachel de Yoda's sculptures, you'll see, have this tension between the pixel and the pore. Susanne Winterling.
Yeah, Susanne Winterling, who's exploring a very interesting species, dinoflagellates, a bioluminescent algae of sorts that basically, which means that it lights up upon touch. And she sees this as she calls it a living touch screen, and is interested in this species as a kind of model for community that could show us perhaps a different kind of ecological future.
And just to say, then you're going to be down in the back of the gallery. You're going to be underwater, and then please ascend the staircase for a sound work by Ignas Krunglevicius, who's right here. And he's created an amazing kind of broadcast station in the ramp. Did you want to say a couple words?
I think you should talk to Ignas in the show instead, as we're running out of time.
Right, and it's a kind of a post-apocalyptic kind of narrative that it vibrates. It's really perfectly situated. And then finally, you'll ascend to outer space where the show concludes, and we encourage you to spend some time with Jacoby Satterwhite's work. This is also a kind of homecoming for Jacoby. As many of you may know, he did his MFA here at Penn, and he's been here many times and participated in our program in many ways, but it's a wonderful orgiastic kind of ending where he sends you off on a spaceship, and for him it's very much about creating a possibility to become beyond human, and he's created a concept album with the producer Nick Weiss of soundtracks from his mother. So more to say on all of this, and we look forward to talking with all of you in the galleries. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hi, is this on? Okay, great. I'm Charlotte Ickes. I'm the Whitney Lauder Curatorial Fellow here, and I'm really honored to be here with Ginny Casey and Jesse Reeves in celebration of their dual solo show, which is upstairs. And I suppose I should do this. Oops, related programs for Miss the Marvel. Check our website. Ginny Casey and Jesse Reeves, named after the artist. And so Ginny is a painter. Jesse makes sculpture that also functions as furniture. And that is Ginny's beautiful baby, Lumen, adding a soundtrack to our talk. And what I'm really interested in is how painting and sculpture, flatness and volume, paint and plasticity come together, can encounter each other in the language or through the language of domestic and decorative objects, some of which have been excluded from museums, but also the narratives of taste, and particularly in modernism and art, architecture, and design. Ginny, of course, works in a still life tradition, as you can see, and Jesse might not remember this, but when we were looking at install shots together, we talked about this as a kind of three-dimensional still life. What I love about their work is that the work is not so still in the sense that each object has a kind of animacy that exceeds its function, that exceeds its use. There's a lot of whimsy, there's a lot of weirdness and strangeness to these everyday objects that we're often so used to encountering that we might overlook. So I think we will, and you'll see Shelf for a Log in there is in the show. So we'll turn to Ginny first. Ginny is a painter's painter. You go to her studio, it looks like a painter's studio, and yet you really depict these very volumetric forms, and often you imagine the inside of a sculptor's studio. And so I'm really interested in that tension. So maybe you could talk a bit about how you got there and your process as a painter. Just make sure it's...
Hello. So yeah, I quite a few years ago, maybe like 10 years ago or more, I was building sculptures using Play-Doh and clay, and then painting from them realistically. And then it kind of evolved to, actually I decided to chop that out of my process completely and just paint from my imagination. And then a few years ago, I kind of returned to that idea, but decided to just paint the sculptures instead of actually creating the sculptures with my hands. I actually attempted to make sculptures by building things with clay, but quickly, very, very quickly realized that I prefer to paint them because there's so much more freedom in painting. For me, because that's my skill set, number one, and I could change the scale, the color. I can pretty much do anything I want without having to think of the logistics of building. So, yeah, and I like to depict the scene of the studio and have things in transformation versus,
kind of still, like a finished still life.
Right, not exactly a finished still life of these sculptures, but having them in the studio situation with all of the violence and the building up and the breaking down of these sculptures.
Yeah, and I should also just mention there's new recent work, but also very new work for the show that has yet to be seen, including this painting on the right by Ginny. So that's really, really exciting for us at ICA. And then I just quickly want to talk about how you imbue these objects with anthropomorphism, animality, this kind of animacy that, again, I think draws upon a bit of surrealist tradition, but it's the ways in which these objects might misbehave or do things that we don't think that they can do. So maybe you can talk about the kind of animacy of these objects. You talked about how it's both imaginative but grounded in the real.
Yeah. Well, usually to begin a painting, I think some kind of narrative, some kind of, even just the smallest kind of narrative of three objects that kind of seem like they're in conversation, that can be the inspiration for a whole painting. So yeah, that's like the first and most important thing is that each object feels like a character of some kind that's in conversation with the other characters.
Yeah, because your work, though technically maybe part of a still life genre.
Yeah.
I'm an art historian, so I often think in those terms.
Yeah.
There's always some kind of action, scary, weird conversations that they seem like in process, or they're engaged in something. You just caught them
Right.
doing something that they might not supposed to do, or you don't expect them to do. So I think that's really important. Again, these might be still flat paintings, but they have a kind of life that exceeds what we could imagine them to have. So I'm going to turn to Jessie. That's my iPhone shot of very new work that we didn't have photography of. Slipcover chair, pink gag. You can see all of this upstairs. And Craigel's nap chair. Again, maybe you can talk to us about the process of how you build on some found frames and the kinds of materials you decide to use on them.
Sure. I guess I'm constantly kind of looking for things, sometimes more specifically than others. Like, I'll just kind of always be researching different, my research is kind of ongoing. I didn't study design, so it's very much comes to me as I encounter it. Or someone will, recommend something to me, and then I'll kind of start looking for certain types of objects. They're not always starting with found objects. Other works you'll see are constructed completely from scratch, but they often involve some kind of found material, even if it's just like a prefabricated wooden object. Originally, I worked just doing upholstery, and most of this work really grew out of having those materials that were just kind of accumulating around the studio and being surrounded by them. So I kind of continue to keep the studio in that way. Like, I let a lot of things accumulate, and I keep most of, scrap pieces from different works and projects, and that's how things get there.
Yeah, and I think you'll see in this new work that my lousy picture, it's much better. You'll really like it in person. Something to note is that you can actually sit on many of these objects in the show. And so that really does change the way we, as viewers, it really disarms our habits of viewing. So the work both is an artwork and it's completely functional. It functions in the home, your home, in people who buy it. And so what could be a kind of boring museum bench is now this kind of elaborate artwork. So it's really challenging us as viewers to let go of some of our habits and experience a sculpture as also a place to which to view Ginny's paintings or some of your other work. I also think it's important to note that this chair is specific. It's a Breuer chair, Marcel Breuer chair.
I mean, I can say, so for example, like these two frames are both pre-existing, and they've kind of been elaborated on. The one on the left, was something my family just had. I strapped it to the car and brought it back from Michigan one summer. And then this, the chair on the right it's a reproduction of a chair. It's been produced over and over again. It's a common chair. It was designed to be in every kitchen, in every home. So I find them quite often on the street in various states of disrepair. This one is
And you'll see two of
working.
them in the show. And then Jessie doesn't make just chairs. She also makes shelves and cabinets. So maybe you want to talk about your practice with those kinds of objects.
Sure. I guess, let's see how to start. The shelving, I think originally I was thinking about shelving as kind of like the most dead piece of furniture. Like, it needs the objects that are stored on it in order to kind of complete its visual language. And I think initially I had just set out to kind of make a shelf that had its own identity, but also had maybe its functionality wasn't quite as generous as other types of shelving, and in that there seemed like there was a lot to explore. So on the left, yeah, there isn't a lot of surface area on that shelf, and in fact, a lot of the functional surface area is kind of taken up by this homemade log, which I had kind of been interested in. I'd been researching log furniture, and I was like, oh, maybe I could cast my own logs. So that was the first one that I made, and then it just seemed to kind of instead want to be absorbed into this piece. And on the right, this piece is kind of more or less wearing a piece of clothing, similar to that pink chair in the first slide. Again, kind of trying to play with the way that objects are concealed within a cabinet. So changing the way that you open and close, or yeah, the way that you get into the cabinet, it seemed like a way to make it more intimate, or kind of, yeah, I guess this one can be like a little bit perverted, I suppose, because it's like a black sheer outfit, and it's very tight fitted, and it has zippers. And it's kind of stitched on in this way that, it's like all sewn onto the object, so it's stitched to be very tight, and it's not like a slip cover. It couldn't be easily removed, which I guess makes it different than that pink chair, which is kind of a covering,
which also has a zipper. So I invite you to join us upstairs where you can see all of this in real life. Just briefly wanted to touch on the installation design, which we came up together collectively with Paul and Robert and Mandy and the three of us in Ginny's studio one January day. I really didn't want to just have paintings on the perimeter and sculpture in the middle, and so we needed walls in between. And these evoke doorways without being mimetic of domestic spaces. And then we have a platform in the back, which is really playing with the way in which we often see design objects in the museum, where it's like chair, 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 chair. And they're kind of divorced from use and like the patina of everyday life. And here it's very playful. We have chairs with paintings that are leaning and some are hung. We have a table smushed up against it. So it's really like these objects that kind of are disobedient and break the rules of function. I think our installation design has very playful moments that break the rules. And just to note that that's Jessie's wonderful ottoman that she made on site for the show. So I encourage you to lounge and take a look at the paintings across from it. And I just want to say thank you both so much. I'm so excited. And it's been a pleasure working with you, and thank you to everyone at ICA who has helped me make this happen.
Thank you.
Please check these out. Take a photo or go to our website. All right, I'm Meg Only. I'm the new assistant curator here at the ICA.
And I'm Samuel Hindelo. I'm an artist based in Philadelphia.
And we're going to give like a couple minutes about Open Video Call. I know you guys all want to see these amazing exhibitions, but I want to thank a few people in addition to who Amy thanked. First off, Open Video Call is a yearly juried exhibition which features promising young artists. An exhibition here at the ICA. I know Alex DeCorte is here somewhere in the audience. He stepped out. It's cool, but he's a former juror, as well as Tiana McLauden, who is going to be in an exhibition at the ICA in the fall that I'm curating named Speech Acts. But I first just wanted to thank Kate Kraskin, who's been doing this show for the past 8 or 9 years. Kate has dealt with me asking every question possible about Open Video Call, so thank you for your patience so much and helping me with this. Taking over Open Video Call, I wanted to move this, if you're familiar with the show, from the ramp space down to a public-facing street. This is on Sansom Street. If you step outside, you'll be able to see it. It'll also be featured on an iPad here at the ICA.
I also wanted to thank just a couple people as well, Anthony Elms, Amy, as well as Robert Cheney for making this possible. We had to get the dean to approve playing things outside of our institution, which you never think about when you make a decision like this. And also Derek Rigby, who is like my savior in being here till 10 o'clock last night, making sure this show worked out. So thank you, and to Sam. But I just wanted to say really quickly that we decided to move Open Video Call downstairs as a way to engage with the public. I was thinking a lot about the ways in which artists are using videos like Snapchat and Instagram, and the ways in which we walk by and interrogate images really quickly. There are some longer videos that are about 15 minutes, but I think they're worth stopping and taking a look at. But spliced in between, we do have video artists that are playing with, I think Jared Rush Jackson is here with an 11-second video, which is amazing, as well as like a 30-second video. But I'm going to turn it over very quickly to Sam just to announce who's in the show.
So we're really excited to announce that we have artists Shakith, Monica Uchiyama, Gene Kim, Jared Rush Jackson, who's right there. We also have Riley Hansen, Sarzia Abrami, Ann Lindsay Martin, and Joshua Francis Beaver. As Meg mentioned, our interest is specific to artists that are thinking about filmmaking and cinema as it's entangled with the instantaneous nature of the internet. Yeah.
And lastly, there's a program for this that's going to be an outdoor screening, weather hopeful.
Right.
It's going to be on Wednesday, May 31st. We will have beer in Little Pop Shop and a DJ and people there, hopefully. But thank you guys so much, and I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
All right.
So we do have amazing weather tonight, and so in the remaining time until 6:30, when all of the public will join us, please take the opportunity either to enter into the galleries and to talk with the artists and curators, ICA staff, we all have these name tags, that's how you know we're staff, or venture up to have a drink on the terrace. Again, for you, our members, those will be free until 6:30 when the public joins us. Thank you again. Let's go into the galleries.